On this edition of Native Report, we watch master quilt maker Gwen Westerman construct a beautiful star quilt.
We view the dreamlike paintings of Rabbett Before Horses Strickland.
And we meet Ramona Kitto Stately, a talented moccasin maker. We also learn something new about leadership in Indian country and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community, the Blandin Foundation, and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. The star quilts of Gwen Westerman are grounded in Dakota culture and history. The woman and her family have made quilts for 6 generations. Her quilts also serve another function. They each tell a story.
I see myself as an artist, which took me a while because I didn't think that I had earned that title, but I'm growing more comfortable with it now, because to be inspired by a story or a person or a landscape and to translate that into an image that other people can respond to is an act of artistry.
Working in the solitude of her basement workshop, Gwen Westerman pieces together a star quilt, a craft she learned from the women in her family. The quilt will eventually be gifted to a person recognizing a personal achievement in their life.
Quilts have been a part of our family life for as long as I can remember. And when I moved to Minnesota, I had some of my grandma's quilts, and somebody came to the house and said, "Why is that on the bed? It should be hanging on the wall." Thought, well, who on earth would hang a quilt on the wall? You're supposed to use it. And it was a little while after that, about 15 years ago, that I started quilting and have done traditional patterns that my grandma used, and then started making star quilts and have adapted that 8-point star to an art quilt format. We think of a star quilt now as something very traditional, and it comes from a traditional place, but we weren't quilters from the beginning. The star, a 4-point or 5-point star, has been part of our artwork from the time we were making petroglyphs, painting hides, and then in quill work and beadwork. And for us as Dakota people, that morning star signals the beginning of a new day, and that we should always be thankful that we can see another day. And when the missionaries showed up and taught our people how to sew, they also taught them how to quilt. And that pattern, the 8-point star, has been adapted now and has become part of our culture. The star quilt has become a gift of honor for a lot of Native people, and we make them for our family members, for people who have accomplished significant things in their lives.
Quilting is a very labor-intensive art form. A single quilt may take 1 or 2 years, sometimes more, to finish, and it's rare that one may come together in a matter of days. Still, Gwen finds the whole process gratifying.
This is called We Come From the Stars, and in Dakota that is Wichank Vihechia Tahan Uhipi. We come from the stars, and it has very traditional colors, red, yellow, blue, white, black, and then some brass bells and a mirror in the center with beadwork around it. And I like to think that people, when they walk up and see this quilt, they can see themselves in that mirror. I had it on my wall, hanging on my wall for a long time because I just wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And then I figured it out probably a year later. So that quilt took me about 4 years to finish. This one is called Ina, for my mother, and it's got multiple layers of meaning here. And obviously the first one is the turtle, and the earth is our mother. My grandmother made this traditional pattern. It's called a drunkard's path, which is a terrible name, but it involves some curved edges, and I worked that pattern into these turtle shapes. And my mother's father's family, they all have water animal names. So my grandpa's name was Yaskanahi, which means hard-shell turtle. And my mom collected turtles, and so I made this for her when she got sick and had to go on dialysis, because I thought, well, this will be good. She can take it with her to dialysis. But she died before I finished it. But I really like the turtles for my mother.
Gwen, a professor of English and Humanities at Minnesota State University, Mankato, and a published author, has won numerous awards for her quilts, some of which are in permanent collections, such as the Red Cloud Heritage Center in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and the Minnesota Historical Society.
My grandmother would have never considered herself an artist. She would say, I'm just an old woman making a quilt for somebody I love. And I think that it's taken off the way it has for me because the stories that are important to us as Dakota people, as Native people in general, are often incorporated into the quilts that I make. Oh, I definitely feel a connection to the past, to the people who came before me, to the stories that shape who we are. And I'm often singing traditional songs to myself when I work, in addition to listening to other kinds of music. And often there's an element of prayer there, depending on what I'm making. We all have stories to tell about who we are and where we came from. And even if we weren't listening directly when our grandparents were sitting around talking, or when our parents were visiting with family members or friends, I think those stories sink in when we hear them, almost subconsciously. We have to sit still sometimes and just listen.
Back in 2001, the Crow tribe decided to change the Constitution because the Constitution that we functioned with before was developed back in 1948, and it was more of a townhouse council where every eligible voter was a member of the council. And it seemed, well, I guess that's my opinion, that nothing was being accomplished. There was no continuity. Every 2 years, there was either a new chairman or the current chairman would have to struggle and fight to maintain his seat. And even at every council, we had quarterly councils, January, April, July, and October. And even at those councils, there was always an opposition to try to oust that chairman. And there was always that struggle, and there was no continuity where business could be done to develop our resources, to maintain, a better lifestyle for our tribal members. So back in just 14 years ago, the tribe decided to develop a new constitution, which is very similar with the federal constitution, you have your three branches of government. You have your executive, your legislature, and your judicial, and that was the way our new constitution is formatted. And as you well know, most states have that type of government also, and we're still at the infancy stage. As you know, we're only 14 years old, but we're, I believe, making progress, developing many codes and laws as a foundation for our nation.
Next, the imagery and subject matter of artist Rabbett Before Horses Strickland are as epic as the canvases he paints. His art has been compared to that of Renaissance masters, and rightly so. The visions and dreamscapes he paints are timeless.
It is 2 days before a retrospective exhibition by Rabbett Before Horses Strickland opens to the public, and he is nearly done with the installation of his paintings. Rabbett attempted his first oil painting as a young man.
It was a painting of Zeus throwing a thunderbolt. It's about 4 by 4 feet. It was big. And that was it. I forgot who it was by. It was a copy. Botticelli, Velasquez, Peter Paul Rubens, all those guys. I just copied them constantly, early on. Picasso, Dali, Duchamp. At one point I painted on glass. I used to paint a portrait, the front, and then I would do the back side of them. And you could look through it and see 2 different views. Then I started doing it on canvas, painting both sides. That was kind of interesting. I think I was 19 then. The whole family painted. My mother, her sisters, her brothers, they all painted. And one was a commercial artist up here in Minneapolis. He's just immersed in it, Grew up in it. It was easy. Glad my mother supported it. Right? Kept it going. And when I was young, bought all those materials and kept it going. She was a painter and did a lot of things, kind of like my cousin does. My cousin does lots of different novelty things, with birch bark and stuff. And they lived out here when there was a one-room schoolhouse in Bayfield when they were little, and then they moved down to Minneapolis. Their mother died, and then they went in the Navy and moved out to San Francisco, I guess. But they were all out. The brothers were artists. Everybody was an artist, so it was pretty easy to get into it, I think, seeing all that. And she was really good, always putting out. Didn't have a lot of money, but she'd give me supplies and stuff, So that was good. She kept me going. Probably wouldn't have been doing it if it wasn't for her.
Much of Rabbett's artwork weaves the fantastic tales of Ojibwe cultural hero Nanabuju with even more fantastic imagery. People and turtles fly. The sun is captured and moved through the sky, and the wind constantly blows.
In my 20s, I used to copy, I used to do the Greek mythology. And I read a few stories with Nanabuju and, shape-shifting into a rabbit. So I thought, well, that's just going to go right over for a satyr, same thing. So I just started getting into like the creation story is a long story. The shut-eye dance is a long story. And there's a lot of material there, and nobody's painting it. And those 13 turtles that are flying around, they represent the months of the old Earth calendar, 13 months for planting. There's a lot of surrealist qualities in my stuff. I know I got the antlers on the comus, but that's for age, and wisdom. And Nanabuju has those. That's very important to me. He's in every, even if I do something political, he's in it. He's in every one. Or something that I've made up like Star Makers over there. He's in it. I make sure he's there, and I make sure that he's known more as an emissary from the Gitche-Minidoom, not a trickster. Because I think he's a planner of a new medicine, a collective consciousness that'll come eventually. It's expressionism, It's a mid-form of expressionism. I mean, it's no reference. I don't look at anything. So when you look at something, you can get a lot of detail. But this is just coming out of me.
Almost all of Rabbett's paintings are allegorical, such as the right to consciousness.
I just wanted to, in my way, show, because of the, there's a lack of film footage, like the Holocaust. We don't have that. And there's very few photos. And it kind of, I don't want people to let that take away from the fact that there was a genocide. And that's what that's about. All the women and children in the middle. And, they got their flags, And then it's a spiritual battle. The eyes of the dead are coming out. What gets you men to do is bring them out. Spontaneity is really alive in these things. The first thing I put in is the black. It takes 2 coats of black. So I think I did it for a sense of moving the eye. And I do that with color a lot too. I try to move the eye, and I do it with wind. Everything's moving in a direction. And these are glazes. They're transparent colors on top of another transparent color, so you're looking through a color to see the color. It's kind of weird. It looks like blending, but there's no blending anywhere. It's a nice effect. It still takes time, but it's not mixing. People think are blending together.
It's a packed house when the show opens, and as Rabbett reflects on the last couple of days, he offers a bit of advice to up-and-coming artists.
Do your own thing, don't let, but I copied, up to 28 years old. I think it pays off. It took me 4 years to make the transition to get out of that, to stop erasing, don't erase so much, just let it flow.
My mother is from Solon Springs, and she was told to go the Christian way, so consequently I was brought up Christian. My aunt, who lived down the road, she went the native way. I mean, you can't call it old ways because it's still current. I mean, there's no difference than how we do things back then, and as far as the culture goes and how they're doing it now. There's some changes, but not much. And I think it's very difficult for the younger generation to follow them ways, because it's like I said, you get back to addiction and all that stuff and some of the hard stuff. But I, growing up on the reservation, I didn't know we were poor. We always had something to eat. My dad worked in the mills. I didn't know I was poor until I got into the 9th grade when the other people that's in my class said we were poor. That's the only time I knew it. We went through a depression where we're supposed to not have too much to eat, and we ate meat all the time. I mean, we ate fish and game and all that stuff, but I didn't know there was a depression. That's just the way it was.
It takes patience and attention to detail when making a pair of beaded moccasins. For Ramona Kitto Stately, each pair she makes has a story behind them, and the creative process is an opportunity to keep the traditions of her ancestors alive in the present.
The quiet of Ramona Kitto Stately's dining room offers the ideal setting for her to work on a pair of moccasins. Traditionally, winter months are when such crafts were done long ago.
Ever since I was a little girl, I was really intrigued with moccasins. I don't know why, but I would go and buy those little ones in the store, little baby moccasins, and I would put beads on them, and I would give them away. And so I've been making moccasins for a long time. It wasn't until I moved to Minnesota and I was really influenced by the plain style and true knowledge of the plains moccasins and the beadwork and kind of the philosophies around that I really started making moccasins. I think a long time before I make a design, and sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes the designs come from the basic philosophies about plains art, which is most of the time when we did our artwork was in the wintertime. We were able to really sit down and stop and repair moccasins or make moccasins. And so the background was white that represented that wintertime. One of the things that I learned early on was that I couldn't sell them because there was no amount of money that I could think of that would make me feel that amount of money was adequate for what I put in there, because it was a piece of my spirit, my piece of my soul, and a very thoughtful piece, and prayers in every single stitch.
The first pair of moccasins Ramona made was for her nephew, and the process proved surprising in ways she never imagined.
He was 13, and he decided to go back to Santee and dance for the very first time, grass dance in Santee. So we started putting an outfit together, and I know that as his tuwee, his auntie, that it was my responsibility to make his moccasins. So I did some research, I talked to some people, I got some hand-tanned hide, and I put down a design, and I started beading. And when you make a pair of moccasins, you start on the outer edge. So you start on that, there's a curve there. You actually start on the curve. It's really probably the hardest part of making a moccasin. So I started that curve, and after the second row, I called my dad and I said, I don't know how I know how to make these moccasins, but they're perfect. And it's the first pair I ever made. And I said, I feel like somebody actually just works through me, because I don't have any experience doing this. It just worked out that way. And what I found out in Santee that same time was that my great-great-grandmother, who was on the exiled from Minnesota, she was on the Dakota Women's March. She was put on a steamboat and ferried to Crow Creek. Her name was Pazahiayuin. She ended her life at the end of her life, she did end up in Santee. And her obituary said she made the most beautiful moccasins. And she taught all of her daughters to make beautiful moccasins. And I read that obituary when I was in Santee, after I'd made that first pair. And I was so moved by the power of that ancestry and how that blood ancestry works through us. These are some of the examples of moccasins that I've made that belong to my family and that we still use pretty often. These I made for my father. And of course, the name that we got after the U.S. Dakota War, our relative went into the war as Muzza Aditi, and he came out. His name was Dennis Kitto. So that's my maiden name. That's my dad's name. So I put Kitto on the front here. But on these moccasins, it represents this emblem that he made, a design that he made that represents our family. Red means that if the red's on top, that we come from the Muzza Aditi line. It's a unique design. But it's a dream that my father had to help us understand our history, to understand that Santee is a place of exile, and that our traditional homeland is the Minnesota River Valley. And so I made these with him in mind. And these are my daughter Jillian's moccasins, and they're really more contemporary design from today. They're more glamorous and glitzy. So these are just some examples of some of the work I do.
Ramona also does other beadwork, and around her home are items that have special meaning.
These are the cradle boards that I made when my children were born. And I made this one first. Both my husband and I made this one together. I made the moccasins, and we bought the board, and then it was just the board with the beadwork. And then we figured out how to do the rest, put the rest together. And the idea is that they take care of the baby, but also that later on, when the child is grown out of this, they hang on the wall and they look over that child and they protect that child in another way. And then when that child leaves this home, then that cradle board goes. So I think that's going to be a hard thing for me. And some of the items that are in my home, I feel like protect this home and make this a ceremony home. This is my talent. It's that one thing the Creator gave me. And so I feel really responsible.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us at nativereport.org and on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Ernie Stevens.
And I'm Rita Aspinwall. We'll see you next time on Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and has a bachelor's degree in social work. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and serves on the board of directors for the American Indian Alaskan Native Tourism Association. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community, the Blandin Foundation, and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.